Welcome back, friends. Today, as we explore the sixth session of our James study, we embark upon a chapter that warns us against worldliness. And James, he contrasts what friends of God and what friends of the world look like. He opens up chapter 4 by asking a simple question. He asks, what causes quarrels and fights amongst you? The fights and quarrels that James is referring to here in chapter 4, it flows from the worldly wisdom that was permeating the Christian community of faith in chapter 3. James then illustrates the disorder and the envy that is the result of selfish ambitions that we read in chapter 3. This image is summed up in verse 4. So up to this point, we have seen two pictures of wisdom, right? Earthly and heavenly. And now it brings us to two pictures of friendships. James says in James chapter 4, verse 4, he says, "You adulterous people, do you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God." You see, James tells us that friendship with the world, it causes conflict. I don't know about you, but I don't like conflict in my life. You see, all conflict comes from the desire that's within us. Desires that are motivated by longing for earthly pleasure. This conflict is threefold. It causes conflict with others, it causes conflict within ourselves, and ultimately conflict with God. The enemy is hard at work, and he's hard stirring up conflict so that we lose sight of where the true battle resides. Friendship with the world comes from sinful desires of the flesh. And when we give in to the flesh, we become friends with the world, and it results in spiritual adultery against God. Throughout his letter, James has been addressing his hearers as brethren, as brothers. But in verse 4, he uses the term adulterous. Throughout the Old Testament, God describes his relationship with his people like a marriage. And when God's people forsake their ways and turn to sin, it is a picture of spiritual unfaithfulness. This is a serious offense when it comes to God, because it creates enmity with God. Worldliness constitutes unfaithfulness towards God. The more we conform to the pattern of the world, living for this world, loving this world, the more we betray God and we cheat on him. Oftentimes we live for what is best for us in the world, because no one sets out to be unfaithful in their relationship, but with compromise after compromise after compromise after compromise, we find ourselves a long way from where we began. For example, according to marriage experts, there are certain stages in which someone goes through having a marital affair. And in these stages, we can see a similar comparison, or similar parallels when we look at spiritual adultery or unfaithfulness. That first stage is distance, right? A sense of loss, especially emotional connectedness. On the spiritual side, we become distant from God. Most of the time, people say, I'm not hearing from God. You see, when this happens, our desires are no longer in alignment with God. That other stage is gratification. It is a temporary sense of relief. And in this stage, we actually make the choice to turn away from God. And we dabble in things that we ought not to. Then another stage is connection. It is an emotional attachment, actively choosing the things of the world. And then we've done that, now we start to prioritize things, giving preference to the pursuit of things outside of God. We see Paul actually uses this phrase in Romans to describe this when he says to not be conformed to the world. Because if we conform to the world, we value the things of the world more than the things of God. We prioritize worldly things rather than the spiritual. And then the final stage is culmination. And in this stage, we have now become stained by the world, meaning whatever sin you are in, it is now in public and everybody identifies you as that. James shares that all passions are at war within us. The war for our souls, it has not faded. The world is still ruled by Satan and manipulated by him. That's why friendship with the world is hostility towards God. See, the world opposes Christianity. And when a Christian opposes God's will, this is sin. And when you fail to put Christ first in your life, you are loving the world. This is black or white. There is no contrast there. The enemy is the prince of this world, and he causes mankind to love things through temptations. Temptations that will lead us away from the path that God has called us to. The Apostle John, he warns us as well in his epistle. He says in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, to do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life, it is not from God, but from the world. And the world is passing away with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. Now, the thing that we need to understand is that we are witnesses to the world. Those who haven't been brought themselves into alignment with God, we must do everything that we can to help build relationships so that we can help guide and show others the goodness that we ourselves have received. Steve Jobs was the brainchild of Apple Computers, and he made the following statement. It was profound. He said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool that I have ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important." What is truly important to you? See, there are three quick things we ought to strive for when pursuing friendship with God. The first, we need to submit to God. A friend is someone who submits to Him, submits to His authority, who reads and obeys His word, obeys what He speaks in prayer, and follows godly leaders. To overcome the world and sin, we hold on to the first and greatest command, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind. Matthew 22, verse 37 tells us that when we love God, there will be no love for the world. And when we live near to Christ, we will be far from the world. Not only do we submit to God, but we need to resist the enemy. The enemy is the devil, and his plan is to bring you under his dominion and his rule so that you can be a rebel against God. But you must hold on to the promises of God and resist the enemy. There's no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, He will also provide a way to escape that you may be able to endure it. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. See, when the world pulls at you, hold on to the scriptures. The third thing we must do is draw near to God. The Bible says, "You seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart." Jeremiah 29, verse 13. The big choice in life is to pursue intimacy with God, pursue friendship with Him. Don't let the battle within you lead you to sin, which will make you fall into sin. It results in trusting the enemy and distrusting God. You see, everyone has a choice, either to be friends with God or be friends with the world. But in the face of death, eternal death, what is truly important to you?